Hello and welcome back to the Wandering Cantos. Today we're going to continue our series on the Quintessential Quintuplets. We're going to be taking a look at the first three chapters from Volume 5, which are chapters 33, 34, and 35. So we'll start with a brief summary of each chapter and then we'll jump into some deeper analysis. So, Chapter 33, The Hospital Encounter. Our story picks up after the Binding Legend arc. Futaro is now in the hospital and still dealing with fever, stomach pains, etc. He barely remembers the end of the school trip and mostly believes that the girls visiting him was just a fever dream. Nino then comes in to visit Futaro, but quickly hides behind the curtain and tells Futaro to not tell anyone that he saw her. Soon after this, Miku, Ichika, and Yotsuba stop by to visit Futaro. Ichika and Miku feel almost like they're each tugging Futaro by one arm, but at the same time, they feel less tense around each other. Ichika gives Futaro his homework and reveals that she is going to continue with her schoolwork. Yotsuba finds Nino and the group leaves. Futaro, however, steps out of his hospital room to thank the girls for visiting him. However, it's later revealed that they were actually at the hospital for shots and didn't originally intend on visiting Futaro. While out, he sees a familiar face that reminds him of something in his past. His fever gets to him again, though, and he passes out. When he wakes up, he finds Itsuki sitting by his bed. She asks him to tell her why he studies so hard. And this brings us to Chapter 34, Today in Kyoto's Tough Luck and Togetherness. So, after some hesitation, Futaro begins to explain why he studies. We get a flashback to 5 years ago. At this point in time, Futaro was a much different person. He thought that studying was for idiots, but he was also known as being the group idiot. He seems to have feelings for one of his class representatives, but when he sees her being nice to someone who is studying, he feels sort of inferior and jealous. So ultimately, while they're on their trip, he separates from the group while they roam Kyoto. So he goes and sits on some steps and fiddles with his camera. While he does this, a lady in, I think, cosplay accuses him of taking her photo. She calls the police over and tells the police to go through his phone. As he is being interrogated, a young girl speaks up for him. She claims that he is innocent and that she saw the whole thing. Futaro ends his story there, but as he talks to Itsuki, he notices similarities between the girl he met 5 years ago and Itsuki. It's also notable because Itsuki comments on how the girl must have changed Futaro and that she wants to change too. This is very similar to the conversation he had 5 years ago. Furthermore, Itsuki takes out a good luck charm that she got in Kyoto 5 years ago, and Futaro remembers the girl getting a bunch of charms while they were together. Futaro remains somewhat in denial, however, and comments on how this must be a coincidence. And this brings us to Chapter 35, Detective Futaro and the 5 Suspects. Chapter 35 is mostly just comedic bits, but it primarily highlights Futaro's strengths and weaknesses when it comes to telling the girls apart. He still struggles to tell them apart based on their faces, but he is getting better at understanding the differences in their personalities. He can also pick them out based on their quirks in their handwriting and if they erase things or not, etc. Basically how they think on paper. One important line to highlight is that Yotsuba says that love is the secret to telling them apart. Basically, if you love them, you can tell who they are. I feel like this is going to become very important later in the story, so make sure you remember this. Itsuki brings up the girl from 5 years ago, and Futaro asks the girls point blank if any of them had met him in the past. No one answers, so Futaro shrugs it off and claims that the girl he met would have been much more scholarly by now, so basically it can't be any of the Quints. So that actually wraps up the sort of summary for these chapters. So now I want to jump into some of our thoughts and general analysis. I feel like the narrative right now is pulling Futaro and Itsuki closer and closer together. Itsuki is the one who's getting information about Futaro's backstory. The nurses also comment on how they think that Futaro and Itsuki are cute together. Itsuki reminds Futaro of the girl he met 5 years ago. And when Itsuki mentions the mystery girl in chapter 35, the panel sort of performs an artistic comparison between her face and the girl's face. And then finally, Futaro imagines what the girl must look like today and imagines her wearing glasses. Itsuki is the only Quint who wears glasses instead of contacts. Beyond that, though, the flashback scene is really interesting since Futaro seems so different. It's also interesting since his change seems to have been at least initially inspired by Takebayashi, who was the class representative, but the mystery girl seems to get all of the credit for his change. I'm also curious to find out who the man in the hospital is. And I also wanted to highlight that Miku seems much more at ease and comfortable ever since getting out of the dilemma of not wanting to share Futaro with her sisters. And I'm also excited about returning to the sort of status quo situation of tutoring and the study group sessions since we just went through a long arc that was sort of outside of that status quo. But with that being said, that's going to wrap up today's discussion on these chapters. If you enjoyed this video, please consider giving it a like and don't forget to subscribe. I want to leave some questions for the comments since one of my favorite parts of these videos is discussing the manga in the comments. So who do you think the man in the hospital is? The mystery girl has to be one of the Quints, right? I'm guessing she's the one who will ultimately become the bride, but I'm sort of curious what your guesses are. Also, if you've read ahead or have seen the show or something like that, please don't actually leave spoilers in the comments. These questions are for people who are reading along with the series. But with that, I'm going to wrap this one up, so take care, and I will see you in the next one.